Mr. Mayor, we are now live.
Very good, thank you. Good evening and welcome to the September 19, 2023 City Council regular hybrid meeting. I'm Mayor Salim Neese. This evening's hybrid City Council meeting is being brought to you by Zoom. We're also broadcasting on the city's YouTube channel. Due to equipment failures, we're unable to broadcast on MITV channel 21 and welcome anyone wishing to watch the meeting live to join us on the city's YouTube channel or via Zoom. Welcome to all and thanks for joining us tonight. Council members, please have your microphones turned on for roll call. City Clerk Andrea Larson, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Andrell. Here. Councilmember Jacobson. I can't hear you, Councilmember Jacobson. I'm back to Councilmember Jacobson. Councilmember Reynolds.
Here.
Councilmember Weicker. Here. Councilmember Weinberg.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Here.
Councilmember Jacobson. Councilmember Jacobson is having technical difficulties, but he is present, and Mayor Neese.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. We have a quorum present. Next, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Council, please mute and turn off your video to ensure the flag is visible. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We now move to approval of tonight's agenda. If there's no questions, may I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved. Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Reynolds, seconded by Councilmember Weinberg. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor Neese.
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson. Councilmember Weicker. Aye. Councilmember Andrell.
Aye.
Councilmember Weinberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Aye.
And Councilmember Jacobson. Councilmember Jacobson, can you hear me? I'm going to ask Chief of Administration to reach out to Councilmember Jacobson because I don't believe he can hear us.
Yeah, looks like he's missing the audio. Okay, motion passes and the agenda is approved. First on the agenda, we have AB 6330, Stationary Automated License Plate Reader, ALPR Cameras Briefing, for which we welcome Police Chief Ed Holmes. Welcome, Chief.
All right, good evening, Council. For the record, Ed Holmes, your Police Chief, and with me tonight, I have Sergeant Scott Schroeder, our Personnel and Training Sergeant, and Kristen McLeod from Block Cameras. And our Chief of Administration is going to pull up the presentation here momentarily. And as she's doing that, you can see this is about the stationary automatic license plate readers. And on the next slide, you'll see the outline of our presentation tonight. We can go to the next slide there. I'll do a quick introduction. Sergeant Schroeder will give an overview of the system. I'll talk then about next steps, and then we'll have a Q&A session with Sergeant Schroeder, myself, and Kristen McLeod. And I imagine Kristen McLeod will be able to answer some of the more technical questions. This is still relatively new to us, and so I'm happy that she's going to be with us to talk about some of the specifics and answer some of the questions. The next slide. Again, the purpose of this is to talk to you about the stationary ALPR camera systems. Reason we're bringing this to you tonight is we've had some community interest, some pretty strong community interest, and some of the council members have reached out expressing interest in learning more about these systems. The high level short story is these camera systems would allow us to record vehicles entering and or leaving Mercer Island. As I mentioned, we're in the very early stages of learning about these systems. There's still a number of factors we have to sort through, costing and funding. I understand the cost to be about $3,000 a camera per year. We have to talk about funding options. There are a number of policy considerations related to retention and who has access to the footage. There's timing. When do we do this? And just to be clear, I'm not in a position to make recommendations on these cameras yet, being so we still have a lot to learn about. On the next slide, you'll hear from Scott Schroeder talking a little more in depth about an overview of these systems. So Scott, take it away.
Oh, next slide, please, Ally. Yeah,
I think-
good evening, council. Oops.
Yeah, I think you're the overview slide. There you go. Scott, is the overview slide. There you go.
There we go. Sorry about that. It's a little slow on my end. Good evening, council. The basic briefing on this, I'm going to leave quite a bit of the technical details to Kristen, as she'd be the subject matter expert. But a really basic overview from my understanding is what we're talking about is basically stationary cameras are being used by a growing number of cities to help basically reduce crime in their region. Black Diamond is exploring them. Cities like Medina have had them in place for some time. They're pretty basic functions to record the rear license plates of vehicles. Oops, sorry about that. Sorry about that, a little new to this. The cameras record rear license plates of vehicles passing through the cameras. Obviously, the most clear location would be on ramps and off ramps, which for Mercer Island would be a pretty easy control method. One of the basic functions is they alert officers of stolen vehicles, missing endangered persons, and wanted persons. That's real-time notification. So when a license plate that's been registered as stolen is detected, it then sends out an alert to all the on-duty officers to then respond to that area. Data captured is subject to a destruction schedule. The current cloud storage is 30 days, and then it's all destroyed unless flagged as evidentiary or investigative. Data captured, just like everything else we do that's not currently under investigation, is subject to public records request. That's the real kind of baseline overview of it. And Kristen is here. Thanks to Kristen for showing up to give us kind of the more technical view.
And before we get to Kristen, the next steps on this next slide, you'll see mapped out just again, kind of high level. If there's interest in considering implementing this kind of a system, our city manager recommends the following 2 bullets. The first would be participate in that community-wide survey. I think we all can acknowledge it's important to get communities response on this. Let's get their take on it. And then based on the outcome of that survey, consider Q2, Q3 for consideration as part of the next biennial budget process. So again, we'll learn tonight about the system itself, and then consideration on the council's part regarding the next steps. And the city manager has these 2 recommendations sitting there for consideration. On the next slide here is probably the meat of this presentation, if you will, really the Q&A part. I understand there's a number of questions from the council based on feedback you've heard from the community. And so the higher level stuff, Scott and I are happy to answer from the police department perspective, and the more technical stuff, I imagine Kristen will have to weigh in on that. So again, we're happy to have her with us. And with that, council will open it up for questions.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Kristen, do you want to take just a moment to introduce everyone to what Flock is?
Sure. Thank you so much, Mayor. Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon, good evening, council members. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and hopefully answer your questions. My name is Kristen McLeod. I'm a community engagement manager with Flock Safety. And I will give a very, very short overview of kind of how Flock Safety came to be. It was actually started, our founder and CEO, Garrett Langley, was experiencing an uptick of crime in his neighborhood. And after lots of conversation with local law enforcement, he decided to look into license plate reading technology, as over 70% of crimes are committed in conjunction with a vehicle. So an engineer by trade, he did a ton of research and found 3 key findings. One, that the technology, license plate reading, had been around since since the 1970s. 2, that it was largely inaccessible to communities because of the price tag. And 3, typically the companies that were supplying that technology were often selling data to third parties. So Garrett set out to really create a company that was built on the foundation of safeguarding privacy and addressing those 3 areas. So creating something where the technology was accessible to communities, where there was transparency, again, privacy safeguarded, and efficiency. So that is a very, very quick overview of kind of how Flock came to be and really what we're grounded in.
Excellent. Thanks for that overview. So council, I'll open it up to questions, first of which going to Councilmember Weicker.
So I guess I'll start. Thank you for that presentation. And Kristen, nice to meet you. We've been talking about this for a while, so I'm curious, Chief, what the feedback is from other communities that have adopted this technology. And if that's a better question for Kristen, let me know. But I'm curious kind of how the public's received that and how the cities feel like it's been effective. And can you kind of give us a couple anecdotes and stories of learnings on the good side and the not so great side that we need to consider if we got some negative feedback?
Sure. And I think you're right that Kristen could probably better answer the question. Reason being is that Medina is the only city in the region that I'm aware of that's had these cameras for any length of time. At least it's the only city I've spoken to. I know their chief really likes the cameras, but I think it's important to remember, for all of us to remember, that Medina is a very different city. It's very different for lots of reasons. So I'm a little reticent to use them as a comparison, but the question you asked, what is their experience? It has been positive. Their numbers are, of course, small and low, and it's a very different community, but they report successes from it. And I've not heard from other police departments from it really. So the community I've heard some concerns around privacy. That's the biggest concern I hear. But from the other chief, the one chief I talked to, they generally like it.
Kristen, did you want to add anything to that?
Sure. So like Chief mentioned, I think privacy concerns are largely what we hear from the community, and we absolutely would understand that. We have, it was mentioned, I think maybe Sergeant mentioned it, the 30-day retention policy. So any still image that is captured by the camera and uploaded to the AWS server, it remains there for 30 days unless it's involved in a criminal investigation. And at that 30-day mark, it is automatically wiped from the AWS server. We really came to that 30-day mark as a sweet spot because, one, it provides law enforcement enough time to investigate a crime that maybe someone was away on vacation for a couple weeks and they come home and it wasn't quite apparent that something had happened. So it gives that victim time to report it and police time to access that evidence to further their investigation. And then second, it's not keeping those still images and stockpiling those images unnecessarily. So it's kind of how we arrived at that 30-day retention and to safeguard privacy. There have been a lot of success, I think, in the state of Washington. There are over, I believe, either 40 or 41 jurisdictions that are currently utilizing the technology. And you see statistics of recovered stolen vehicles, missing persons, and amber and silver alerts are another area that communities have really, I think, appreciated and have really seen an impact as far as utilizing the technology and getting timely recovery of some missing vulnerable people.
Excellent. I see our city manager has popped in, so I'm sure she has a word to say.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council, for letting me cut in line here. I do want to mention that should we pursue implementation of the cameras, although Ms. McLeod is describing what they recommend is 30 days retention, there would be accompanying policy work that the city would undertake related to the cameras and our own retention schedule of records. So that is not a hard and fast decision that has been made for us. That is something that we would need to discuss along with all the policies related to the implementation of a system like this. So I just want to clarify what we're talking about tonight is general. And should we move forward, we do have some policy work that we would undertake to accompany the use of cameras like this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Excellent. Thank you. Councilmember Anderall.
Hi, thanks for being here today. My question concerns the emphasis on privacy, and I'm just not at all understanding how privacy is preserved if we have requests for public records and those public records are provided in form of still photos to outside persons, and regardless of whether you wipe your database after 30 days or not, those images live on forever in the hands of somebody else. So can you address that?
Yes, thank you. It's a great question. So I'll speak more generally kind of all the privacy safeguards that we have in place, and the 30-day retention being one. The second is that the footage is owned by your city. Flock would not have access to it. We would not be able to provide any of those still images captured in your city to anyone, unless that is we are forced to by a court process. That is your data. And as far as the public information.
If you can stop for a second, that's exactly my point. It becomes a public record the minute it's captured, and we cannot protect it in that way. And if somebody asks for it, we have to release it. And so it just seems a little like a false assurance to say there's all these privacy protections, because there really aren't.
Councilmember Anderl, if I could jump in here, I think there's kind of two threads going at the same time. Ms. McLeod is referring to is that, we own the footage as a city, so that we are in control of it. But the question you're asking is, if somebody submits a weekly public records request for the video footage for a specific date, and we still have it within our retention window, it is a public record and will be provided. So it is a public record. It would have to be obtained the way the rest of our records are obtained, through public records requests. But the footage is a public record. I want to make sure that is clear.
Great. Okay, thanks.
If I could jump in really quick and just clarify that it is not video. It is just a still image of the rear of a license plate. And that in itself, that still image of the rear of the license plate, is not tied to any personal identifying information. When the personal identifying information comes into it is when the police department would access, they would have to enter in a search reason to identify a certain image or a license plate or vehicle description that is of interest to a criminal investigation or that missing persons alert. And when they would access that, they would have information connecting it to the personal identifying information, but the images itself that are stored in the server are purely still images of the rear of a vehicle.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. I get lazy with the language there, but I do want to clarify. I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing, Ms. McLeod. I'm sorry we didn't have an opportunity to prepare ahead of this meeting. To Councilmember Anderl's question, even the still images, if requested and we're given a date range, they are a public record. So I want to be clear, and maybe we can move on from this topic so that we're not debating public records. The footage, the still images are public records. I want to make that clear.
Very good. Councilmember Reynolds.
Yes, this one may be more for the chief or Sergeant Schroeder. Let's say, to use the example that Ms. McLeod used, I go on vacation for 2 weeks and I come home and I found my house has been robbed, and I call the Mercer Island Police Department. How would you use this camera footage? Given I don't know what day it happened, what time it happened, would somebody actually go through and interview everybody that entered the island for the last 2 weeks?
That's a good question. I'll try to take a stab at it. It's a good question. I think these cameras, I don't want to suggest, or I don't want there to be an impression that these will solve all crimes. In that scenario, when we had a 2-week window, I don't know that there'd be much of any value in spending hours and hours and hours going through, thousands of license plates. I would envision more the scenario where it's the middle of the night, very low traffic volumes, and crime occurs. It would give the detectives a place to start. If we have such a large data set of license plates, it's very difficult to have any meaningful investigation based on that. So again, it would be probably middle of the night, those times when the very low traffic volume, an incident happens, a serious crime happens, and we would have a place to go for a lead. That's more what I'm thinking.
Is it safe to assume that you would probably, even for that situation, probably only have the manpower to pursue it if it was, more than a mailbox theft? It would have to be a violent crime or a car theft or some other big deal before you would pursue it?
Yeah, I think it would probably depend on how the workload at the time of the on duties of the detectives. One of the nice things about this community is the police department. We are able to follow up more so than perhaps much busier departments. We can spend extra time on some other lower level crimes. So if staffing time permitted, I would expect the officers or the detectives would look at that footage. Again, middle of the night type of a, low traffic volume would be most manageable.
Thank you.
Councilmember Weinberg.
Yeah, a couple questions for Ms. McLeod. So you mentioned that there are 40 jurisdictions in the state of Washington that are using your cameras. Would you list for us the 3 that you think are the closest match in terms of city size and to Mercer Islands, and in terms of viable comparison?
Oh, that's such a great question, and one that I am not readily prepared to answer. I can certainly, though, I can pull some nearby jurisdictions, maybe of like size, demographic, population density, et cetera, and I can hopefully provide you with more information. Would that be all right?
Sure. I guess while you're looking at that, I'd be curious to know whether those jurisdictions observed a measurable decrease in crime in the year or years after they installed the cameras, and also how they measured that. What was the actual mechanism that they used to show that there was a statistically significant decrease, or was there a statistically significant decrease in that? I'm also curious as to the reliability of the hardware. Is there like a mechanism that your company uses for measuring the mean time between failures for the cameras?
There is, and that is also a question that I can reach out to the right people and get you an answer to.
Okay. And I guess the other metric other than the mean time between failure was the average downtime per year in terms of hopefully minutes, but if it's hours, then hours. But trying to get a feel for how reliable, essentially, how much we can expect to find images for a particular time if there's a need for it.
Okay, I'm just going to try to clarify that last question. So the question is asking essentially if there is an error or a faultiness in the hardware, how much downtime is occurring between when we identify the issue to getting it back up and running effectively?
Well, there's 2 metrics that I'm most familiar with in terms of measuring reliability and measuring uptime. The metric most commonly used for reliability is mean time between failure, which is usually a measure in years from when you set it up to when it needs replacing or needs maintenance or has otherwise gone offline. The other measure is the downtime per year, meaning if you look at the full 10 years that the camera has been there, during that 10 years, how much time has the camera actually been offline? Was it only 5 minutes, which is great? Or was it offline for several days during that 10-year time period? They're 2 kind of different measures, but I think both of them would give us some good guidance as far as how reliable the system is.
Certainly. I will reach out and get folks who would have this information, and we'll share all of that with Sergeant Schroeder and Chief.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Jacobson.
Thank you. Thank you, Kristen, for your responses. Thank you, Chief, for yours, and Jesse as well. One of the things that I don't know that we're prepared to talk about today, but I would be very interested to learn what the ROI is. And by that, I mean return on investment by those people who use this. And if it costs X dollars, do you get X plus benefit out of it that you wouldn't otherwise get? And I'm not asking, I know that data is not available at this moment in time, but it's something that interests me a great deal. But I do have some questions, a couple of questions for Ed and then one for Jesse, but I'll take that around. Chief, as I understand, the State Patrol has one camera on Mercer Island, one traffic camera that it uses. Is that correct?
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I know there are cameras that look at like intersections for red light timing, but I think Department of Transportation has cameras. I don't know that they record. I think they may be for live traffic monitoring, but I really don't know.
Okay, and the State Patrol also, or the state of Washington for that matter, has cameras on the freeway on I-90, don't they?
Yes, and again, I don't know if those are just for traffic monitoring, like you see on the news when they give a traffic report, there's live feeds of traffic. I don't know that they record, nor do I know that they're detailed enough to get license plates.
Okay, thank you. I've got more questions, but I'll take my turn later, Mayor.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Yeah, I've got a few questions. So I'll leave my hand up. Mr. Cloud, can you just help me understand the technology a little bit better? So I'm assuming there's a fair amount of AI involved here, but is the license plate captured then compared to anything identifying the car, or is it solely the license plate that is read by, I'm assuming, your AI systems?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, you are correct that we use machine learning to inform the technology to identify certain things. We refer to it as, in addition to the license plate number, and it can also identify the state. We also use what's called a vehicle fingerprint. So things like the make, the model, and certain features. So if a vehicle has mud flaps or a roof rack or a bumper sticker, now on the bumper sticker, it can only identify that the vehicle has a bumper sticker, but nothing, no specifics further than that. So those details of what exactly that bumper sticker is, it cannot be identified, just that the vehicle may have a bumper sticker, in addition to things like tinted windows as well. And we utilize machine learning to get our precision and our technology to be able to do that.
So if my Subaru that has a, take me to the mountain sticker and mud flaps and blue and tinted is stolen, and then the license plate is replaced, and the answer to this question, but you're not sure, but what is the likelihood that would be positively identified by your system if it went through one of these gantries?
So I don't know an exact likelihood that it would be identified, but law enforcement would be able to take, so in your report and you're giving your vehicle description to law enforcement, that can all be entered as an alert into the system. And so if a vehicle matching your description drives by one of the flock cameras in your town, officers will be alerted within 20 seconds, and then they would then proceed with their investigative process and procedure at that point.
Great.
And then it would depend on kind of the sharing and those policies in place with other law enforcement agencies if that information were to be shared beyond your city.
Got it. Okay. I will leave my hand up for my unrelated question.
Okay, I'm going to take a quick shot. So Kristen, you said that the sensors want to hit the rear license plate of the vehicle. And in Mercer Island, if you were going to hit the rear of vehicles entering Mercer Island, you would do that on the on-ramps or off-ramps to the freeway. That property is owned by WSDOT, and I'm not sure something that we could install equipment on. So can you just speak to the physical layout of this system? You would Would you have to position an ever increasing number of these cameras on our surface streets as soon as you get away from WSDOT? And has anybody looked at what the number of those might have to be for the full coverage?
So I may actually ask Chief and Sergeant to weigh in on this. I know we have a team that will work with your department to figure out the best, most efficient, and of course, placement within the law that we can. And I'm actually not quite sure if those conversations, if we've gotten kind of that far down the line with this.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, I'll jump in and then the chief can fill in anything else. And thank you for bringing this up. This is a good reminder for all of us that our city, the northern part of our city, includes state-owned infrastructure associated with I-90. That is not just the freeway and the ramps, it is also the overpasses. And so we would need to talk to WSDOT about whether or not they would support installation of this type of technology. They may or they may not. We would certainly need to bring more information to them. Otherwise, we would be looking at setting up the technology outside of that footprint. So if you think about the I-90 corridor, we would have to be outside of that in either direction. Chief, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, well, I would just say that there are two parts to the question in my mind. There's the high-level conceptual question: do we want this in this community, these type of cameras? And then the second part, and it's a big part, is okay, if we do, then where would we put them? And there can be enough hurdles there that could maybe change your mind whether you want them or not, depending on how steep that hill is to climb. So really, conceptually, is there support for these? And then if so, gee, where do you put them? There's hurdles to cross and technical things we haven't sorted through yet. So in my mind, those two parts are both very real and in play.
Great. Kristen, quick follow-up. What infrastructure does a camera need? What needs to be on site for it to operate?
So we have a whole team that will be able to kind of assess the need. It's a pole, and it's solar powered, and then there's a small camera at the top. Thinking if I could share a visual of that. But we have a team that would work with your city team to make sure that where we're placing those cameras, that we're able. We don't want to. We really want to work around. We don't want to make anything ugly, right? We want to make sure that the placement of it is, in congruence with your aesthetic. We want to, be mindful and kind of balancing all of those things and try to make a small footprint with it. But it's essentially, I think it's a 14-foot black pole with solar panels and a small camera affixed to it. I'm not quite sure if that answered your question.
Yeah, so it doesn't need power, it doesn't need internet. It's really self-reliant.
Correct, and it operates, yes, over, we use cellular data.
Very good, thanks. Okay, and nobody's put their hands down and then re-raised them, so I'm just gonna recycle the order, which goes to you, Councilmember Reynolds.
For what it's worth, I did take it down and put it back up again, but thank you. Just tell me about the data that is stored on the system. And I have a two-part question, if I will. The first and easy part is it stored on your servers or city servers or both?
So once the still image is captured, it is uploaded to the AWS server, the Amazon Cloud server.
Okay, so neither then. Okay. And then
Right.
The second question is, what is it that is stored and readily available? Is it the photos, or do you immediately automatically transcribe it into license plate number, car or car color, model, date and time, etc.? Does that automatically get saved at the same time?
It is just the photo.
Okay, so if somebody were to make a public records request, and maybe this is a question for a city manager or a city attorney, and asked for all the license plate numbers of cars that came onto Mercer Island yesterday, would we be supplying 10,000 photographs to them? Or would we supply a database of pictures or a database of license plate numbers? What would we have to provide?
Public records requests, Councilmember Reynolds. I will tell you generally, oh, did I just cut out? Sorry.
No, you're here.
I'm at home and I'm getting that beep that I'm going to lose my internet. Bio, do you want to pick up? Sorry.
Sure. Councilmember Reynolds, it would depend on the records request. Sometimes they would provide a preference as to how they would like to receive it, and if we can accommodate, we do accommodate that. But at a minimum is to allow them to come to a city property and review the responsive data that we have. And of course, that would depend on, again, how specific in the language of the request that we receive.
So does the system have the ability that if you queried it and said, give me a list of all license plate numbers, could it do that? Or is that up to manual intervention to look at the camera, to look at the pictures? That's a question for Kristen, I think.
So let me see if I can, once an image is captured and it's on the AWS server, the Flock operating system, which the department would utilize, and I think the best way to equate it is to equate to body cam footage. So the images are hosted, but once your department makes a query and accesses a specific vehicle fingerprint, that description of the vehicle, or the license plate number, and then that information is then in the operating system and they are querying it for a criminal investigation or a missing vulnerable person, then it would be, and again, I would defer to council, it would be treated just like body worn camera footage.
Bear with me, I'm sorry, I'm still not understanding. If we got a records request saying, give me the list of all the license plate numbers that came on the island yesterday, would the system be able to provide that in an automated way?
And I'll just add that I don't know, I don't understand, I don't have information on how the system works. But if it was if by a press of a button you could produce that list, then we would have to provide that list.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So the question is, can it do that?
And I will get clarification, because there is a search requirement that is related, that you would need a court case number to pull a specific vehicle description or a specific license plate number. And I'm not positive on that, as council mentioned, that one click of a button. So if you give the system a time frame, if we're able to pull that, or if our system kind of puts a full stop as far as being able to provide bulk license plate numbers or still images within a time frame.
If you
I know
could
we
check
can
into that
provide aggregate data. Yes, I
if
can.
you could provide that as a follow-up, I'd be most appreciative.
Absolutely, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councilmember Jacobson.
First of all, Kristen, thank you very much for your responses and your willingness to provide additional information, because this is a subject that has a lot of a lot of aspects, and you don't expect any one person to know all the answers. As long in that connection, I would suggest that we find out from the state patrol or the state of the DOT, well, what limits there are as far as citing these things on the on-ramps, or perhaps asking the Flock, where are they in the perfect world? We want to cite them and finding out from the DOT if that's a problem before we have our next visit to this in October or November, whenever it is. My question is this, probably for Beal. We're able to condition the length of time that we retain a record, a public record, aren't we?
Well, it depends. If the record is subject to retention laws, then we have to comply with the state retention laws. Beyond that, it would be a city policy whether or not to keep the record. And that, as the city manager mentioned, that would be something that we would apply. I assume that there's no retention policy applicable for still photos of cars coming in and out of Mercer Island, unless it's a subject of a criminal investigation or other proceedings. Just your regular photo would not be subject to retention. So we would have the ability to set that, whether we want to keep it for a day, 2 days, a month, or a year.
Thank you.
Very good. Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Yeah, I think so. Kristen, obviously there would still be a lot to work out here in terms of retention and records management and things of that nature. But what would you say to someone who said, let's say we install this system and they say, I want to make sure that my license plate cannot be tracked? What advice would you give them?
So that is one, it's used for precision policing. So it's not a mechanism where your license plate, unless you are subject to a criminal investigation, that you would be able to track. So your department, I've mentioned before, in the system, if an officer were to go into the system and want to access the whereabouts of a certain vehicle or license plate, utilizing license plate number, vehicle description, they would have to enter a case search reason. And that is auditable. And if someone were to, you arbitrarily start looking up license plate numbers, that would be, bells and whistles would go off, and that would be very easily identifiable for your department. And I think with democratic process, the privacy safeguards that are in place, and really good ALPR policy on behalf of the department, that seems to be very appealing and reassuring to community members.
I guess my question is a slightly different nature. Just create a hypothetical here. If someone was the victim of stalking, for example, and their stalker had their license plate number, what would prevent their stalker from using a disclosure request in this instance to find out what time they are coming and leaving from Mercer Island?
So again, this would be considered only accessible by your law enforcement agency, those agents that the city deems can have access to the system. We would not allow anyone to access the license plate number from our system, and it's not linked to any personal identifying information. They just simply wouldn't have access.
Yeah, you wouldn't allow access, but if someone were to put in a public disclosure request for license plate ABCD12345, we would be required to provide any information we had on that. Correct?
You would have the image of the back of a vehicle, but no location information.
But we would have the time and date, correct?
I don't believe so. I think that would also only be accessible to law enforcement, and I will clarify that. But it's the ALPR. It would only be for law enforcement's use for a criminal investigation. I don't know that someone who, for nefarious purposes, the example that you said, the stalking, would be allowed to access that information outside of, the still images would be part of a criminal investigation. And maybe I'm definitely not explaining this wrong. I don't know if Chief or Sergeant.
It sounds like maybe there's still some questions to be answered around public record requests when a public entity such as the city of Mercer Island has information and someone asks for it. Except for some specific narrow exceptions, we have to provide that. So to the deputy mayor's point, if someone is stalking someone else and they request that license plate of the person they're stalking, the time and day it goes through or comes onto Mercer Island, I believe we'd have to give that to them, but I don't fully understand the technology with the AWS, but generally speaking, we have to provide data. So I think that's the privacy concerns that I hear about center largely around that very specific topic. could someone request my license plate? Someone I don't want to be stalking me. Could they request my license plate, and would you have to provide it for them? And I am of the belief the answer would be yes. That's just my initial take on this without having any further in-depth understanding of how the system works.
And I will
if I may
get you.
refine Chief Holmes' answer a little bit further. The purpose of a public records request is irrelevant in 99.9% of the times. And we can't ask or discriminate based on the purpose. Second, if the technology is there to be able to pull up the photo or record of a specific license plate. If we receive a records request for license plate ABC 1234, and we can input that in our system and be able to pull that an image if it's there, then we would have to provide it. But we don't have any duty to go through a month's worth of record looking for that license plate specifically.
Okay, moving on to Councilmember Weinberg.
Yeah, so one follow-up to the question I asked earlier. When you're looking at the comparable cities and determining the effectiveness of the implementation, could you also find out for us what mechanisms those cities used for paying for the cameras? Did they just find the money in the general fund, or did they pass levies to do that? And essentially, how are they paying for that? The other thing, you mentioned that it's solar powered. And I saw a picture in the slide deck showing a camera with these wings, which I presume were the solar panels. So I'm wondering about snow. And when you get a bunch of snow on top of that, then I presume that the solar panels don't collect nearly as much energy. In fact, they could potentially be down to zero. And so I presume also that the solar panels don't collect power at night. And therefore, I presume there's a battery in this device such that the solar energy is collected and slowly released over time. And so can you give us a feel for how long is it designed to work without any light coming onto the solar panels? Like a week, or could it go a whole month off of the stored battery power? And you're on mute.
So
No,
without knowing absolute specifics, I will say that we have placed these cameras in, no pun intended, in very shady, low sun areas, and they have worked without fail. But I can certainly give you some more detailed information in response to your question.
Okay, and the last question I had was actually one for I think probably for the chief. It was mentioned in the materials that we would be looking at 7 cameras. I'm trying to figure out how we came up with that number, because there are 2 on-ramps and 2 off-ramps at just East Mercer Way alone. And if I count in my head, I think there's around 12 on the island, or I think there's exactly 12 on-ramp, off-ramp combinations, unless there's a place where we figure 1 camera can cover 2 ramps or something. So I guess I was wondering how we came up with the number 7 as far as the number of cameras.
Yeah, we were looking just at off-ramps. So it would capture a license plate coming onto the island. Now, we could also do on-ramps. So coming and going. That's more of a policy decision. There's benefit to both. There's also added cost when you add the both on and off ramps. So I think that would warrant further discussion on just how much we want to capture, and the privacy concerns again. And I am mindful of that. People become particularly concerned if we're capturing when they come and go versus just when someone comes on. So those are policy decisions we have to work through for sure.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councilmember Anderl.
Thanks. Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum's questions largely addressed what I was concerned about, but and not to beat a dead horse here, but I do have significant privacy concerns for people who are experiencing some sort of domestic violence or stalking kind of threat. You said, I think, that there would be no date or timestamp on these camera video still images, but and so you can clarify for me if that's correct, but if somebody asked for images from July 1st, regardless of whether there's a date and timestamp on it, they would know it was July 1st, right?
Yes, I will get clarification on what exactly would be able to be released, or what would be contained on that image, and how that would play out in response to a public records request.
Yeah, and I guess a follow-up question to that is just, how the rear license plate camera, I mean, is it, if we only have 7 off, on ramps coming onto the island, will there be enough context around that license plate for people to say, oh yeah, I know that's the West Mercer, or I know that's Island Crest? Or is it just like this tiny little nothing picture of nothing but a license plate and 5 inches of bumper?
We do try to position the camera so that it's very tight on the rear. Of course, it's not perfect. And along those same lines, I will mention that there is no facial recognition capability with this technology either. You may have, if there is someone walking alongside the road and the camera angle, you might see a person, but the machine learning really trains and the camera positioning to focus in on that rear of the vehicle, trying to eliminate as much on the outside of that as possible.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'd love follow up on the specifics about date and time, specifics on the images. Thank you.
Maybe you can provide some images. I think there's a lot to be said just with what does it capture. Question for signage. So I don't know if this is BO or Ed, but does Washington State have a requirement for signage that indicates that ALPR is in use? And if it does, what does that typically say? Or even if it doesn't, is it a best practice to have signage?
I can tell you what, I asked the Dyna's chief, because they have warning, if you will, warning signs or advisement signs, and I asked if they were required. His answer was no, they're not required. They're not audibly recording, it's just the image, but I'm happy to turn it over to BO to get his take on this too.
That is consistent with my understanding of the law. I mean, I have not researched this issue, but as of my general knowledge of requirements for signage requirements for camera, it only applies to intersections and school districts. So as of right now, there would not be a sign would be optional. It would not be required by law.
Excellent. And then this is probably a question for City Manager Bond, but as a follow-up to my earlier WSDOT question, an email came in and somebody asked, well, why would WSDOT care what we put on their property? Can you just speak to that question briefly?
Well, it's their asset. So obviously they need to conduct their own review, including risk. I'm sure they would want to make sure that they're not going to be responsible for the cameras or the images, so they would likely do an internal review of how this may impact them. And so I'm not sure what else would go into that, but it would be the same if we were asked to install something on our property. We would do a review as well to measure risk and compatibility.
Very good.
So that's not a fantastic answer because I don't know for sure, but I presume that is how they would approach it, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I presume there's some drilling into their stuff that is involved. So, Councilmember Reynolds.
Yes, so Ms. McLeod, I presume that as in any technology, this thing is not perfect. what percentage of the time does it fail to read a license plate? Either because it's dirty, because the plate is missing, because the camera's blurry, what have you. It's too dark to make out, etc.
I believe, and I will confirm, I believe our accuracy rate is 98% of the time. And I'm not sure of, and which I can circle back on, the exact reasons why it would fail to capture, but I can get that information as well.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Well, I'm not seeing any additional questions, so that was a great back and forth of Q&A, and I appreciate that opportunity to have you also come back and provide a lot of answers. With that, we're going to move on.
I think two more hands popped up.
I see Councilman Reynolds again.
Yes, just a quick request for the chief. First, to emphasize what Councilman Weinberg had asked for, I think hard data on how these have worked to catch or prevent crime would be very helpful. But I would also like to hear some anecdotal crime statistics, meaning if you talk to the chief in Medina, can you have him give specific examples of crimes they've been able to solve and what role these cameras played in doing that?
Yes, I can answer that right now. I talked to him last week about it, and he said mostly it has to do with stolen cars. I think they had 3 stolen cars come on into their city in the last month, he said, and right away their officers deployed to the area where the stolen car was, and they attempt to stop it. So for that, again, I mentioned earlier, Medina is very different for lots of reasons than Mercer Island, but for them, I think as I understood their chief to say, their primary benefit that they find is with the stolen vehicles entering into their city.
So he wasn't able to cite an example of where a burglary or a robbery or anything like that was a suspect was captured from that.
The conversation I had with him was around stolen cars. I can certainly ask.
Okay, that would be helpful. Thank you.
City Manager Bond.
Sure. I was actually going to talk a little bit about next steps. So let me go ahead and do that. Council, I apologize. It was not a banner day for me today, and we've had some technology issues, so I missed part of the conversation. But my takeaway is we have a lot of questions that were asked. Some of them were answered. Some of them require some additional follow-up and research. What I might suggest, Mayor Neese, before we move to the some of the next steps that Chief Holmes shared on his PowerPoint earlier, is that we regroup internally. We compile questions and answers, and then possibly we schedule a follow-up discussion with the City Council in a month or two, or when we have time. Particularly, I want to talk to the City Attorney a little bit more about public records requests so that we can really be precise with our answers, which we were not able to do this evening. Would that be a satisfactory next step for folks before we pursue the community survey? Okay, thank you.
Sounds good. Councilman Weinberg, close this out.
Yeah, sure. So one other thing came to mind while we were talking about this. If a criminal were to steal a car, some random city in the area, and then swap license plates with a car that is owned by a Mercer Island resident while that car is parked somewhere off island, and the Mercer Island resident ends up driving onto the island in a car that they own, but with license plates that are, unbeknownst to them, stolen. I presume the system would dutifully look at those license plates and report that a stolen car has just arrived on the island. And if we had these cameras set up, I presume that the police department would be alerted, and if the police department were to locate the car that has those plates, I hope that we would design our policies about approaching that car with the possibility that the owner of the car might in fact be the victim of the crime and not the perpetrator of the crime.
Councilmember Weinberg, I could jump in right now and say, when officers run plates, and we don't need an ALPR necessarily to do that, officers can check plates on their mobile data computer. If it comes back as a stolen vehicle, there is a vehicle description that accompanies that plate that's stolen. So it's a stolen vehicle, license plate 123 ABC on a green Ford pickup, but the officer's looking at a white Prius. The first indication would be maybe that's a stolen, put a stolen plate on that car. So we are accustomed to that very scenario a number of times over.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Chief and Sergeant. And we're going to push forward. First, let's see. Our first item of our next item on the agenda is City Manager's report. So we're going to welcome City Manager Jesse Bond.
Good evening again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Casey Thompson is going to share her screen here. If I lose my connection, Ali Speets is prepared to jump in and assist. Good evening again. It is Tuesday, September 19th. And we will start with City Hall closure and then schedule updates. Council and any community members that are watching this evening, I'll just remind you that in mid-April, we emergency closed our City Hall building due to the presence of asbestos in one area of the building at above background levels. Unfortunately, through subsequent testing, we found that we have asbestos in a good portion of our HVAC system, and we have an inoperable HVAC system, which translates to a whole host of other challenges for us. Council, we came to you in July and provided a comprehensive update on what had happened and what we found. And while you did not give formal direction to permanently close City Hall, I think the understanding is that the investment to overcome this issue is significant enough that it really doesn't make sense to make that type of investment in this asset. So I'm preparing to come back to you, though, on October 3rd for an update, certainly to go back through the information we shared in July. And we'll be asking you to formally direct me to take the necessary steps to permanently close City Hall. So we need this just because we're making decisions right now about the building and trying to protect remaining assets inside that building. So that is coming October 3rd. I know you may have been fielding questions from the community about City Hall. I just wanted to point to that meeting date. We are working really hard behind the scenes to prepare that information for you. So some short-term things. These are reminders to the council, but also awareness for community members. We are going to be moving our city council meetings to the Slater room at the community center. That is the room that's on your left as you walk into the community center building. Actually, tonight we'll be asking you to approve funding to make that happen. We are on track to be able to go live the first meeting in November, the first council meeting in November. So that will allow all of you to come back in person. But we'll also have hybrid capability in the event someone needs to be remote. We will start with the council in the Slater room space once we're up and running, and then eventually our boards and commissions will also be able to utilize that space. Council, another question we've been asking, since it's known that we do not have an operable HVAC system at City Hall. Winter, we think, winter and cool weather appears to be right around the corner. So I just wanted to reassure you and our members of our community that we have winterized the City Hall building. We've turned off the water and all of the plumbing systems have been drained just in the event we have a surprise freeze sooner than we were expecting. Long term, I know the question everyone is asking is, what are we going to do now? That is a very good question. And we started our long-term planning work actually earlier this year. It was already on our work plan, and we are preparing to come to you to begin those discussions here soon before the end of the year. And that work I anticipate will carry over into the next year and probably the year after as well. So we have a lot going on. That was pretty high level overview. Just know that we'll have agenda bills and agenda items that will start rolling at almost every meeting through the end of this year related to the City Hall closure. Okay, next slide. So for the time being, while we are getting the Slater room up and running for hybrid meetings, City Council, your meetings, our board and commission meetings will all be on Zoom. We do maintain a room at the community center to meet our public facility requirements for all of these meetings. So if anybody would like to attend a meeting in person, you can come to the community center to do so. You can also provide public comment in person at the community center. Council, your next hybrid meeting is October 3rd. Board and commission meetings up next is the Planning Commission on September 27th. As a reminder, we keep all of our meetings updated on our website, and the link is at the bottom of your screen there. Next slide, please. All right, city updates, and I've got a range this evening. The first up is a reminder about our annual docket process. So this is the process for soliciting proposals for comprehensive plan and development code amendments. We kicked this off a couple weeks ago, and the applications are due by October 1st. So anyone wishing to submit a proposal for consideration, that falls under the category of a comprehensive plan amendment or a development code amendment, can go to our website at the link below. It has all the information on how to submit a docket proposal. As I mentioned, proposals are due to the city by October 1st. Once the proposals are received, the staff prepare a packet for consideration by the Planning Commission. That work will happen in November. And then the Planning Commission recommendation comes to the council in December. So that will be the very first meeting, the very first city council meeting in December. Items approved by the city council for the docket are added to our work program, primarily the planning department's work program for 2024 and beyond. So it's just a reminder, the docket process is open and happening right now. Next slide, please. Another question that I have been getting quite a bit in the last couple weeks is where are we with the 2024 comprehensive plan periodic update? We started working on this in 2022, and council, I'll remind you that you adopted a resolution approving the scope of work for the comprehensive plan. This was something we did right out of the gates just to set expectations for what we would be tackling under this review. Jeff Thomas has reminded me that this work we're doing includes over 30 element specific changes that are required by either the state, one of our partners in the region, or King County. The resolution also highlights the development of an economic development element and a robust housing element. So we've been in front of the council a couple times on both of those topics, so I think you're well aware of that. Also included in the council directed resolution is a new park zone. And I've specifically been fielding questions about that. So I wanted to make sure tonight that I reassured you the new park zone is language is in development. It will follow the same schedule as everything else. It will go to the Planning Commission for review and then come to the City Council. We are expecting, council, just to set expectations, that a good portion of your first 6 months of council meetings in 2024 will be dedicated to the comprehensive plan review work. So we have a very busy 2024 ahead of us, and we are anticipating we will adopt the comprehensive plan update in June of 2024. We have a Let's Talk page on the comp plan update. I know our staff are periodically pushing information there, so I'll encourage you to check it out. And please reach out to me or Jeff Thomas, our planning director, if you have any questions about either the prior slide, the docket process, or where we are on the comp plan update. Okay, next slide. Okay, also continuing the theme of questions and complaints we've been receiving. If you've come on or off of I-90 lately, and I'm sure you have, you've noticed that the ramps are not looking great again. There's a lot of litter and debris that is built up. We have been in touch with WashDOT. We know we are on deck for another periodic sweep. We are finding, however, and you are probably observing, that the frequency of sweeping the ramps by WashDOT is not enough, and they're becoming unsightly, and we're getting complaints. So I wanted to give a shout out. Our Public Works team recently proactively applied for a grant from the Department of Ecology to increase the ramp sweeping. And we were awarded the grant. So that is great news. My thanks to them. They jumped on it. They knew this was a really high priority for us. So we're still working on the details of the grant and execution, but it will be used 100% for ramp cleanup and increasing the frequency that will occur over the next couple of years. So more information to come. I thought this might help, though, you council in fielding questions and inquiries you're getting about the conditions of the ramps on and off the island. Next slide, please. Switching gears a little bit, I put this slide together. I just wanted to give a shout out, our right-of-way teams, our utility teams, our parks teams, our streets teams. Everyone is just really, really busy coming out of the summer season and getting ready for winter. We are starting to make that transition. This slide just highlights a few of the things that have been happening over the last couple of weeks. Our right-of-way and stormwater staff are conducting pipe inspections along Southeast 59th Street ahead of our rainy season, making sure we don't have any blocks or clogs and repairing any problems that we find along the way. You also may have noticed that our right-of-way and park staff landscaped along the Sunset Highway corridor, and they were out supporting the Art Uncorked event that happened just last week. We also completed repairs to the irrigation system on the North Mercer Way overpass. This system, I think many of you know, that irrigation system on the overpass hasn't been functioning for 2 years, which we can tell by the state of the vegetation. So they were able to complete that work as those sections are starting to reopen after all the construction that's been happening out there. So we'll now have service. We'll be able to support everything that's planted along that overpass and in some of the art installation areas as well. Speaking of City Hall closure, one of the big things that we're doing in terms of our long-term facility planning is looking at all of the systems in our buildings and preparing to report back to you on our findings. We started this work earlier this year, ironically, and we are turning our attention now to the maintenance buildings and the fire stations. We did some work specifically this last week on the HVAC systems. So we're getting into all of our buildings for maintenance and system assessments, but this is all informing a much larger conversation coming to the council about building replacement, building upgrades, and really trying to get our arms around our facility assets and plan for replacement and repairs over the next 10, 20, 30 years. So thank you to the maintenance team. This is just, a little highlight of some of the great work they're doing, and I wanted to make sure I thank them because they've been doing a lot of work. All right, next slide, please. Council, you're aware of this. I believe I wanted to remind the community as well. We are allowing the South Luther Burbank Park parking lot to be used by King County sewer construction crews again this off season. And so we did this last year as well. They are leasing the parking lot from us to serve as storage space for construction equipment and some parking as well. So the parking lot will essentially be closed from October until this spring. As we've worked to accommodate the needs of the sewer crew, we're pretty limited the areas they're working. There's not a lot of off-street parking. And so we found, although we hate to take a parking lot offline, we found that this was a good compromise to help get a major asset that serves Mercer Island replaced. So we've put out, King County has put out notices to the community, but we've also been cross-promoting it for awareness. Next slide, please. All right, some upcoming events, and I'll pick up the speed here. Just a reminder that we are hosting a blood drive on September 25th and 26th at the community center. Bloodworks Northwest is coming in partnering with us and the Mercer Island Chamber of Commerce. So we encourage you to sign up and donate blood. You may have heard this has been an ongoing issue really since the pandemic related to blood shortage. So we're happy to make our facility and our resources available to get the community in and donating blood. Next slide, please. Also coming up, a really important event, October 4th at 7:00 p.m. at the Community Center. This is the fentanyl awareness presentation. It's called One Pill Can Kill. There's not a day that you watch the news that you don't hear about the impacts of fentanyl on particularly frightening our youth and even younger and younger youth. As I just read a story today about some young people in southern Washington that were impacted by this. So we are doing everything we can in partnership with the DEA, the school district, your Youth and Family Services Department, and our police department to get the word out to our community. This presentation is open to everyone. Again, October 4th at 7:00 p.m. The DEA will be here. A really important presentation. I encourage you to come out and participate. And this is just one of the many ways we are trying to reach the community with more information. And it's a top priority of both the Youth and Family Services Department and our police department. Next slide, please. All right, Council, this is on your calendar, but I have an update on this event. On October 21st, we'll be hosting our Arbor Day event at Luther Burbank Park. This is a partnership with Mountains to Sound Greenway, and we will be also officially opening the South Shoreline Trail on this day. So we are anticipating a brief welcome ceremony at 9:45, and then we'll have a volunteer event that will start at 10:00 a.m. and run to 1:00 p.m. We're still working out the logistics, but I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of the welcoming event, the official opening of the trail, and it will likely take place at 9:45. I believe we are doing, instead of a ribbon cutting, we'll be doing a tree planting. So more to come, and Casey Thompson, my assistant, will be sending you an invite so that that's all on your calendar. Okay, some good news, and then we'll wrap it up here. You know, I want to take this moment to say huge thank you to all of our volunteers that have been supporting the city, not just this past summer, but over this year. We have an amazing group of stewards out in our parks. In fact, we have over 600 volunteers who have completed 1,400 hours of work in our parks this year. Just absolutely amazing contributions. Our forest stewards have contributed an additional 335 hours to supporting just a wide range of information events, including an information table at the Mercer Island Farmers Market. And I think that's the picture you see on the screen there. So I'm so proud that we have these folks out, you know, rolling up their sleeves and helping in our parks, but also serving as ambassadors at all of these events that we hosted over the summer. So my thanks to them. We'll be doing some more work to recognize the volunteers in the coming months. Thank you again to our forest stewards. All right, final slide here. Council, you may be aware of this, but I wanted to share again. In September, we hosted the Swim Across America event again at Luther Burbank Park. This event attracted more than 340 participants and raised over $500,000 to benefit Fred Hutch Cancer Center. We really appreciate all the swimmers and volunteers coming out and the Mercer Island Marine Patrol for supporting this event. Although this wasn't a city-led event, this is a great way to showcase how we work with folks to host these kinds of events in our parks for a very, very good cause. So pretty impressed with that $500,000, the $500,000 they raised for this event. Okay, I think that's it. Yes, it is. Thank you, Council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Casey.
All right, our next item of business is appearances. This is an opportunity for anyone to speak to the City Council on any item. I'll remind the audience that there's a public hearing on town center parking study later on the agenda. If your comments pertain to that topic, we'll ask you to hold your comments until then. City Clerk, do we have anyone signed up for public comment this evening?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Tonight's agenda will include in-person public appearances and remote public appearances via Zoom. Individuals wishing to address the council may do so in person or by Zoom or telephone, provided they've registered with the City Clerk by 4 p.m. today. When it's your turn to speak, you'll be called by name. Remarks must be addressed to the council as a whole and not to individual council or staff members. As it is election season, please be reminded that state law, specifically RCW 42.17a.555, prohibits the use of city facilities for campaign-related purposes with limited exceptions. Accordingly, please do not make campaign-related comments during this time. Please speak audibly and state your name and city of residence for the record. There'll be a timer on the screen. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. When your time is ended, I'll thank you for your comments and move to the next speaker or next item of business. City Clerk, please call the first speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our first speaker tonight is Jan Molinaro.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I hope I'm coming through.
Sounds good.
Very good. My name is Jan Molinaro. I'm the mayor of the City of Enum Club, but I'm here tonight as your Sound Cities Association president. And I do wish to address council on 3 different topics tonight concerning SCA. First of all, I want to thank the City of Mercer Island for being a valued partner to SCA. Your partnership is a value. It's not only strong in terms of having a city like Mercer Island part of SCA, but you also have a voice in the region through SCA. Secondly, if you haven't joined us at a recent SCA networking event, we really strongly encourage you to come out down to Renton, that short drive down 405, to come and visit. We do have one scheduled Wednesday, October 25th. And it should be a rousing topic of interest. And I think one of our associates has sent an email out concerning that. The best thing about these networking events, in my opinion, is you're able to mingle and develop further relationships with other electeds, as well as support those business partners that really help support SCA. Last but not least, I want to thank those who are currently serving on boards and commissions. As you know, SCA has the capability of being able to appoint to 27 different boards and commissions. And I thank each and every one of you that are participating. And with that, thank you. It's an interesting conversation you all had on those cameras. And I'm glad it's something that I learned a lot and was able to participate and listen to. Thank you. If you got any topics you want to discuss on SCA, go to cityoфenumclaw.net, look for the mayor, send me an email. I'm happy to respond and have a conversation. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, City Council.
Thanks, Jim.
Our next speaker tonight is Gardner Morelli.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, guys. Hope you guys all had a great August. Hopefully you had a little time off. My name is Gardner Morelli, and I live at 8454 West Mercer Way. And once again, I am here representing the Mercer Island Beach Club and its desire to replace its existing marina structures and swim docks with new structures. For some time now, we've been working with city staff on development of a new shoreline master plan code, ZTR 23-001, to address the current code gaps that impact our project. We have appreciated the support of city staff over the many months to develop this code, which will benefit 3 impacted entities on Mercer Island while enabling us to be good stewards to the environment and to the neighbors surrounding our properties. On the 15th of August, representatives of Mercer Island Beach Club and city staff reviewed our project plans against the proposed new code in a pre-application meeting. While we learned in this meeting that staff were unable to provide the explicit feedback we had hoped for due to not having all the information they required in order to assess our preliminary design, we did receive feedback from staff that essentially confirmed the proposed design was very much in line and on the right path. Our big ask now is that once this proposed code is approved per your process, if an issue is identified that impacts permit issues, that staff be willing to work with MIBC to find collaborative, real-time solutions to keep things moving forward. While we all anticipate this code amendment will address every possible path on this topic, the reality may be that technical hurdles still lie ahead. So we request continued support from staff to collaboratively work through these issues without having us need to come back in front of you all, which I've done many times, and I really like the time we spend together, but I know you guys are going to have plenty of other tasks next year. That said, Mercer Beach Club supports the work that has been done by staff in the Planning Commission to date. It has been done in a collaborative manner, including some back and forth discussions that we truly believe is a healthy part of the development process. Thank you.
Thank you. City Clerk, any other additional public comment?
There are no further speakers tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. All right, we'll move to approval of our consent agenda. The consent agenda contains AB 6331, September 8, 2023 payroll certification, certification of claims for September 1 and 8, 2023, City Council meeting minutes of September 5th, 2023 special hybrid meeting, AB 6325, expressing support for the King County RE Plus program, resolution number 1648, AB 6334, interlocal agreement for jail services for South Correctional Entity, SCORE, AB 6335, MICEC, Slater Room Meeting Room Upgrade, AB 6339, WSDOT Local Agency Agreement, Highway Safety Improvement Program Grant for Traffic Signal Safety Improvements, AB 6342, revised 2022 through 2024, ASME Collective Bargaining Agreement, and AB 6344, First Amendment to Agreement with Kirkland for court facility use. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
And second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Jacobson, seconded by Councilmember Weinberg. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Jacobson,
Aye.
Mayor Neese,
Aye.
Councilmember Weinberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Weicker,
Aye.
Councilmember Androl,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Aye.
And Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Motion passes. Our first item of regular business is AB 6336, public hearing on draft town center parking study. This public hearing is now open as of 6:28 p.m. Individuals who registered with the city clerk's office before 4 p.m. today may make public comment on this agenda item. You'll be called by name when it's your turn to speak. Please speak audibly, state your name and city of residence for the record. Limit your comments to 3 minutes. City Clerk, is there anyone signed up for a public comment that wishes to address the council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Our first speaker tonight is Kian Bradley.
Very good.
Hi, sorry for the delay there.
Welcome.
Hey, so I wanted to give a comment about the parking study tonight. So my name is Kean Bradley. I live here on Mercer Island in the town center. So I get to look out my window and see how people use the roadways and parking all the time. And I read over the parking study that was commissioned, and I think it has a lot of actually really good suggestions in it. And so I wanted to highlight 2 of those tonight. The first one is that parking utilization actually seems rather low. At the peak, we're only using 70% of the on-street spaces and 50% of the off-street spaces. And this is below the 85% maximum that parking experts usually try to target. And so I wanted to direct, excuse me, City Council's attention to recommendation 3B in the report, which talks about making a shared parking supply. Right now in the city code, we require that every new development has independent parking for its own building, which leads to one lot being relatively full while others are relatively empty. And so the biggest benefit to having a shared parking area or shared parking requirements would be that development will be significantly cheaper, as you have to spend a lot of money to dig deep and make parking garages below every new building. That would in turn make commercial rent and residential rent cheaper in the long run. The other point I wanted to get across was about narrowing some of the roads. My two least favorite streets in the town center are 77th Avenue, the main north-south road, and then 27th Street, the main east-west road. The travel lanes on these roads are wider than necessary. They're maybe 12 or 14 feet and have a mostly unused center turn lane. 77th Avenue at least has some bike lanes, but they're pretty narrow, and so I often see people riding on the sidewalk instead, contending with pedestrians. So I actually sent an email earlier today around 9 a.m. With a possible reconfiguration for these roads. By just using paint, we can narrow the existing travel lanes to reduce car speeds, add parking on one side of the road, and then add a buffered bike lane on both sides of the road. And this is exactly what recommendation 3D of the report says. If we make biking and walking nicer, people will be more okay with getting around outside of a car, and we also address people's concerns around on-street parking. So thank you.
Thank you.
There are no further speakers tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Considering that, the public portion of this hearing is closed as of 6:31 p.m. And we will welcome CIP Project Manager Sarah Bluvis. Welcome.
Good evening, Council. Thanks, Mayor. I just have two very quick slides for you all. So I'm going to share my screen. Bear with me. All right, do you see the presentation?
We do.
Terrific. So just an update on the project timeline for the town center parking study. We all know we've been here for a while. Tonight is an exciting milestone in the project to keep us moving towards adoption by the end of the year. So tonight with the public hearing, we close out the public comment period that opened on July 31st with the publication of the updated draft report on Let's Talk. For those community members who may have wanted to comment and didn't have time or forgot about the deadline, we will still be accepting comments until 11:59 p.m. tonight. I'll provide the Let's Talk link on the next slide. So there's still a few hours left to get your comments in about parking. After tonight, we will be back on October 17th for a discussion with the City Council, which I'll talk a little bit more on the next slide, and then hopefully be back in November, on November 21st to adopt the report. So a little more information on those last two milestones. So to get us to the October 17th City Council discussion, we request that the City Council members submit your questions and suggested changes to staff for the report by October 4th. We'll compile your questions and staff responses in a matrix, which we'll send out for the agenda packet on October 17th. We'll also compile a second matrix that includes the requested changes as well as the other suggested edits that have been submitted by the community and staff. And that will be the bulk of the discussion on October 17th. The changes that are approved by the council that night will move forward with the final report. So that'll get us to October 17th when we'll have this discussion. We'll also provide an overview of all the public comments that have been received. In addition to tonight's public hearing, we were also receiving comments via email as well as via the comment forum on Let's Talk. So it's been some great engagement on town center parking over the last couple months. And then depending on how the conversation goes on October 17th, we will tentatively be back on Tuesday, November 21st to seek adoption of the town center parking study. All the updates that we have between now and November 21st will continue to be shared on Let's Talk. We have the link for the page there. And then these dates have also been added to Let's Talk tonight, so community members can go and see when we'll be back. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen, and I am happy to take any questions that anybody has. Oh, you are on mute, Mayor.
It's going to happen from time to time. Councilmember Reynolds.
Yes, I wonder if Ms. Bluvis or Ms. Bond, if you could just clarify one thing. We're talking about adopting the study. The study doesn't have specific actions proposed. It's just a report. So does it really require adoption? What is the significance of a yes vote other than saying we've received the study?
I will let City Manager Bond take that one if she is still with
I
us.
don't, oh wait, no, she is there.
City Manager Bond is listening as she's making her way to the community center. So can you repeat your question, Councilmember Reynolds?
Sure. It just, since the study doesn't seem to have a commitment to a particular action, what does a yes vote to adopt the study indicate other than we've received the report?
Well, I think that what part of the study is recommendations on what could be done for parking. And so a yes vote from the council on that is to say yes, that the recommendations within the study are things that we want to move forward with, knowing that we need to appropriate funds for that work and resources when needed.
So it's not a commitment to undertake any particular action, though. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. It would, most of this work will need to come back as a CIP project, or it will be work that's worked into, our project managers' portfolios to complete once there's approval from the council, but we would need to do appropriations.
Okay, because it did seem like the vast majority of the things in there were, you should consider this or study that, and not an actual do this.
Right. So if it were something where, there's a recommendation to consider something or to study something, we would come back with a project or a proposal to study or to consider something.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Jacobson.
I thank you for raising that, Greg. I think it's well taken. And I also, one of the concerns I have about, not concerns, but is this landscape may change significantly in the next few years. But we really don't know what impact Sound Transit will have if and when it starts its service here. And whether the come back to work stuff really does in fact increase the number of people who are going back to work in the community of Seattle. So I think the way it's worded is really very good, because there's a whole series of suggestions, some of which would be conflicting if we did them, but I think it's nice to look at the things that are available to do, and from that perspective, I think that the study is beneficial.
Very good. Councilmember Reynolds, did you have a follow-up? Okay.
Sorry, old hand.
Any other questions for Sarah? Not seeing any. Well, thank you for your work on this, Sarah, and we look forward to seeing you with this again. Our next item of regular business is AB 6346, which is reconstituting the City Council Finance Ad Hoc Committee. And we're going to welcome Chief of Administration, Allie.
Hi, I'm back. Let's see. So before you is agenda bill to bring back our Finance Committee, this ad hoc committee of the City Council, for two specific reasons. One is to look at the classification and compensation study that we're working on, and work through some of the details, the questions, the philosophy, in order for us to put together the package to move forward with a salary schedule for non-represented employees. In addition, staff have been working on a cost allocation plan, which outlines the process for accounting for the total costs of providing municipal services, looking at kind of the indirect and overhead costs in addition to the direct costs of the service. So we have the basic work, we've started on that and want to get some direction from the council. We think it'll be nice to have an early touch by the council or by the subcommittee before coming to the entire committee.
Very good. Okay. Any questions from council? Not seeing anything. Seems like Councilmember Reynolds and Councilmember Weicker and myself were voluntold to accept this assignment. So if there is acceptance of this motion, we will be duty bound to fulfill that. So council, is there a motion to reconstitute the City Council Finance Ad Hoc Committee to review and evaluate the cost allocation plan, compensation policy, and appoint Mayor Neese, Councilmember Reynolds, and Councilmember Weicker to serve on the committee?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Jacobson, seconded by Councilmember Anderall. Any discussion? No, looks Craig's excited. City Clerk, please call the roll.
I love this stuff.
Actually, I do want to say thank you guys for doing the subcommittee. I think this worked well last time we used it to sort of work through the nuts and bolts before bringing it to council. So I appreciate staff and Mayor Neese and Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum for doing this again. I think it really helps. So thank you. And I appreciate the honor of serving again.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jacobson,
Aye.
Councilmember Weicker,
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum,
Aye.
Mayor Neese,
Aye.
Councilmember Weinberg,
Aye. and
Councilmember Androl.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, motion passes. Our next item of regular business is AB 6337, which is MIYFS Foundation Funding Acceptance Agreement. And we welcome Chief of Administration, Allie Speeds.
Me again. Hi, Council. We are here tonight. Derek Franklin is our YFS administrator, and he is here to answer any questions. I have a PowerPoint short just to talk with you about the 4-year funding agreement with the MIYFS Foundation. Okay. Yay, it worked. All right. So tonight we want to present to you the agreement that we've drafted with the MIYFS Foundation for a 4-year funding agreement for the Youth and Family Services Department. So in 2022, the city and the foundation signed a cooperative agreement, which memorializes our partnership. As most of you know, the MIYFS Foundation exclusively raises funds for the Youth and Family Services Department. In 2020, the foundation committed to an ongoing annual donation of $300,000 to the YFS department. And in 2022, the foundation donated an additional $215,000 for a second middle school counselor and our emergency assistance programming. Now, the foundation would like to increase their annual donation amount to $515,000 starting this year and through 2026. With this discussions with the foundation, we said, let's memorialize this in a 4-year agreement, which helps us do better financial planning. So the funds, the $515,000 will be for funding the second middle school counselor position through June of 2026. Supporting the emergency assistance program. So that's food security and rental assistance. And then, of course, just general YFS budget support for our community and school-based programming. Upon approval of the funding agreement, the additional revenue will be included in a future budget amending ordinance this year. And then council would need to authorize the expenditure of $100,000 of this additional funding for a second middle school counselor. And then, of course, the increased donation amount will be reflected in the 2025-2026 biennial budget, which will come next fall. So the recommended action tonight is to accept the increased donation for 23 through 26 and authorize the city manager to sign the funding acceptance agreement. We also need you to appropriate $100,000 in 2024 to continue funding the second middle school counselor position. Last but not least, thank you to the MIYFS Foundation. We honestly could not provide the excellent services that we do without their support. They have been dedicated to us for over 3 decades, and we couldn't do it without them. And we are also very thankful for all of our island donors and volunteers. Derek and I are available to answer any questions for you.
Very good. Council, are there any questions before I get to some motions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. The first of the 2 motions, may I have a motion to accept the increased annual donation of $515,000 from Mercer Island Youth and Family Services Foundation for 2023 through 2026 and authorize the city manager to sign the funding acceptance agreement memorializing the donation substantially as set forth in Exhibit 1 to AB 6337.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Weinberg, seconded by Councilmember Jacobson. Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councilmember Weinberg?
I think this is a marvelous and unique thing for Mercer Island, and it's wonderful that we have this, and it's been here since I was in high school, and the Youth and Family Services, and we definitely need to support this and be thankful that it's here.
Thank you, Councilmember Reynolds.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Councilmember Weinberg said. This was it's one of the things that makes Mercer Island special and unique, and extend a big thank you to the people of Mercer Island for their incredible generosity in supporting this program. We couldn't do it without you.
For sure. Councilmember Weicker.
Just want to echo the thank you very much. And I saw Derek turn on his camera for a minute and a half, so I want to give him a minute to give us a little insight about how important this funding is. So let's give Derek the floor for a minute.
Thank you, Councilmember Weicker. With your permission, Mr. Mayor, the support is critical. I think one thing that we learned over the past 3 years, especially, was just the role behavioral health plays in the overall health of any community. And I think with this kind of support, it just really demonstrates the commitment the community has in general for that kind of support moving forward. Specific supports for the middle school counselor are very appreciated. Middle schools over 1,000 students compared to elementaries that are 500 or 600, and to go elementaries we have 1 counselor, at the middle school to have 2 just makes a lot of sense numerically, and as well as excuse me, support for the students. Overall, again, just to remind folks, we have 2 counselors also at the high school, one of whom does drug and alcohol prevention and intervention. Big picture is that the services, I think, are critical. The support from the foundation, it remains critical. Councilmember Weicker, thanks for the chance to speak a little bit, and thank you to the council for your support. Just remind folks that there is not perhaps another city in the state that has a department like this that's able to turn around and support its residents. So thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I just want to say thanks. I know a lot of work went into crafting this agreement, and a big thank you to the community for these resources. And Derek, welcome. I can't remember if this is your first time with us in your new role, so thank you for stepping in there, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you. I'll just add to that. Voters in the region approved $1 billion worth of crisis levy funding, and most people don't know that as those funds become online and they start funding all sorts of resources, mental health resources around the region, there is more and more pressure for a limited number of staff positions. And really, this longer term commitment by the YFS Foundation provides us sure footing to guarantee that we have the revenues to not only retain but attract the counseling resources that we need to provide the services that Islanders have come to depend on. And so huge thank you to them for not just for the donation, but for the foresight to make these longer term commitments that give that budget certainty. And I will turn it over to you, Councilmember Jacobson.
Well, it's nobody's, or it's not a secret that this is a remarkable community. And the Youth and Family Services is certainly a prominent part of that. And I personally, and I'm sure my colleagues join me in appreciating what the counselors do and the dedication they have, many over long years. I know that Derek Holland has been here for many years, and that kind of stability really makes a heck of a difference in the product that we're delivering. But the remarkable part is that we have citizens who support this out of their own walls, and will continue to do so. And I think it's also remarkable as a city council that we're joining forces to make up the difference or the deficit, and we very actively support MIYFS and look for ways to be sure that it's enabled. And I think that's one of the spirits of our community is to do this. And I think it's great that we're all signed on to do it now and to continue to do it into the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Very good. All right. With that, City Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Aye.
Mayor Neese.
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson,
Aye.
Councilmember Androl,
Aye.
Councilmember Weicker,
Aye.
and Councilmember Weinberg.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, motion passes. Next, may I have a motion to appropriate $100,000 in 2024 to continue funding the second mental health counselor position at the middle school?
I'll move.
I'll move.
Okay, moved by Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum. Who is the second?
Maybe me.
Okay, Councilmember Anderall. Any discussion, Councilmember Jacobson?
No, that's a bad one.
All right, not seeing any discussion. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum,
Aye.
Councilmember Weinberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson,
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds,
Aye.
Councilmember Androl,
Aye.
Councilmember Weicker,
Aye.
and Mayor Neese.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Motion passes. Does anybody want a quick break before we go to yep. Okay. 10 minutes enough? Perfect. All right. The council will be in recess for 9 minutes, coming back at 7 p.m.
Mr. Mayor, we are live again.
Thank you. All right, the council is returning from a 10-minute recess at 7 p.m. here. Our next item of regular business is AB 6340, the Shoreline Master Program Amendments, ordinance number 23-15, first reading, for which we'll welcome CPD Director Jeff Thomas.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council, and to all. I'd like to first introduce the staff supporting the effort here this evening. Deputy Director Alice Van Gorp is with us this evening, as well as Planner Molly McGuire. Most of you have not met Molly yet. She is a planner that's been with us for almost a couple of years now, working primarily on development review side of the planning house, but she's been working on this particular matter with this shoreline code amendment, and she's here this evening and will be working to move us through the presentation that we have planned. So in addition to that, I would also like to introduce Planning Commission Chair Mike Murphy, who has joined us this evening. And there will be an opportunity a little later here in our presentation for the council to ask any questions you may have of Chair Murphy regarding the Planning Commission process that has taken place for this particular matter. A little bit, just a couple other quick comments before we get rolling with the presentation. Allison, if feel free to start firing that up. One comment, I would like to comment just briefly about the process here. And if you want to move to slide 3, perhaps, to get us rolling. The process not only has involved staff and the Planning Commission here, but the applicants for the docket request last year, the Mercer Island Beach Club, they've been critical in working with both staff and the Planning Commission through the process to date. And in addition to that, the Department of Ecology, this is one of the rare instances when we do code amendments that we have a state agency that will immerse themselves actually in the process and engage in what's called the joint review process. And the Planning Commission public hearing that was actually conducted was actually the required public hearing for ecology as well for their part of things. A reminder, this is one of 2 outstanding items that have been docketed by the City Council that have yet to fully complete a legislative review. The other matter, the council actually just extended interim regulations regarding House Bill 1220 and transitional facilities. There were some interim regulations that the council extended back just a month ago in September on that particular matter. So that one, and then this one that we hope to close out here over the next few weeks are the two items that have been docketed that haven't been brought to a conclusion just yet. So my next to last comment, you did hear actually from the applicant's representative, Mr. Morelli, during public comment this evening. And again, I think Mr. Morelli spoke similarly to what I just did about the process that's ensued so far with the legislative review of this matter. And it's by all accounts, it's went fairly well. He also did reference a pre-application meeting and development permits. I do want to issue a friendly reminder to council that those matters are part and parcel from what we've convened for here this evening. Development permits are in the purview of the city manager and the administration, and we have in fact had a pre-application meeting with here the petitioner for this matter. And it's based on, whether these regulations actually go through and become an official part of our code, then that pre-application meeting and the discussion from that will lead, I suspect, a permit application. So, but that's over on one side of the house. The legislative side of the house here is the policy and the rulemaking, and that's what we're here for this evening, is with this code amendment to our shoreline regulations. With that, I'm going to ask Molly to get rolling here. We've got a short slide deck. Molly's going to cover some additional background, and then the substance of the code amendments, which is the heart of the Planning Commission recommendation, When we cover those 6 or 7 slides, that will be the break and the opportunity for council to ask any questions that you may have on that. And then we'll wrap things up after that. So Molly, I'm going to turn things over to you at this point. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jeff. So before we get into the proposed code amendments, I'll go over a brief background on the Shoreline Master Program, what it is and how it relates to this amendment process. Jeff touched a little bit on the joint review process as well, which I'll go into a little bit more. And then some other key points that led us to the proposal that we have today. So the Shoreline Master Program is used to regulate land use and development within the area 200 feet landward from the ordinary high water mark. And it is required by the Shoreline Management Act, which allows cities to adopt local shoreline regulations that are consistent with state standards. The SMP and any amendments are reviewed for consistency with state standards by the Department of Ecology. So when an amendment is docketed, like the one requested by the Mercer Island Beach Club in the fall of 2022, the city is allowed to use a joint review process with the Department of Ecology, which requires close coordination through meetings and joint public hearings and provides ecology with the opportunity to comment on the proposed amendment if something is not consistent with state standards or if another approach would be more appropriate. Throughout this process, ecology did provide letters to the Planning Commission to be considered during the public hearings and recommendation to City Council. And this close coordination allowed the city to come up with a proposal that is both consistent with state standards and the Planning Commission, and that residents are happy with. So as part of the joint review process, the city sent an initial proposal to ecology following the Planning Commission recommendation to adopt. And on August 3rd, the city received an initial determination of consistency from ecology. This just means that the initial proposal that received Planning Commission recommendation to adopt is consistent with state standards and can move forward in the review process. Once City Council approves the amendment, it will go back to ecology for final approval. So as I said before, the original amendment proposed by the Beach Club was added to the 2023 docket, and this amendment is summarized in the second bullet point here, which would amend Table B in the SMP to allow any existing private club or residential community to redevelop its moorage facilities with a shoreline conditional use permit. So you may observe that this original request is quite different from the proposed amendments in the packet today, and there are several reasons for this change. The original concern from both the Beach Club and the Planning Commission is that there was not a path forward for the Beach Club and other similar organizations to redevelop their facilities under the SMP, since the standards and requirements for moorage facilities are heavily geared towards single-family residential docks. So staff had proposed an alternative to the Beach Club's original amendment that would have accomplished the same goal, but was a little more consistent with the language found in state standards. However, several concerns arose with this option due to broad language and unpredictability in potentially allowing unlisted uses, which was what the proposal was. And so staff was then directed to explore adding marina as a new use to the table and to draft standards for marinas, which would address concerns over lack of predictability and clarity in the original proposal. So the proposed amendments in the packet today allow a clear path forward for the Beach Club and other marinas to redevelop and expand their facilities in compliance with the city's SMP, comprehensive plan, and state standards. So now I'll jump into reviewing the substance of the Planning Commission's recommended code amendments. These are also included in Exhibit 1 of the agenda bill if you want to review in more detail. There are 4 code sections to be amended in total, starting with MICC 19.13.010, which establishes the relationship between the SMP and federal and state law. This section would be amended to include a reference to WAC 173-27, which contains shoreline management, permit, and enforcement procedures to provide much needed clarity on the permitting process for various shoreline permits. Section 2 amends MICC 19.13.040, Table B, which is shoreland uses waterward of the ordinary high water mark, to include marina as a new use. So marinas would be allowed in the urban residential shoreline environment designation, which is one of the 2 designations on the island and makes up most of the shoreline. And it would only be allowed through the shoreline conditional use permit process. If necessary, I can provide more information on the conditional use permit process, but in short, the application would go to the hearing examiner, and if the hearing examiner recommends approval, it would go to the Department of Ecology for final approval. Section 3 is where the proposed standards for marinas are located. So this would be a new subsection L under MICC 1913-050. And this establishes development standards that are consistent with state regulations for boating facilities and marinas. The full development standards are located in attachment 1C of the agenda bill, which include regulations on eligibility, location, size, and environmental requirements. A couple of the key regulations that were discussed in depth throughout the review process include limiting marinas to only those organizations that provide significant public access by being either owned by the city, serving more than 50 people, or open to the general public. Limiting marinas to the minimum size necessary based on information provided in the required demand analysis, which would include projections for future needs during the life of the development, and then limiting the location of new marinas to only where a marina existing before the adoption of this ordinance. Section 4 adds a definition for marina to the definition section in the code that reads: a private or public moorage facility providing the purchase, lease, and/or use of a slip for storing, berthing, and securing watercraft, including both long-term and transient moorage. Marinas may include accessory facilities for providing incidental services to users of the marina, such as swim facilities, waste collection, boat sales, or rental activities, and retail establishments providing fuel service, repair, or service of watercraft. Marinas do not include moorage facilities serving 4 or fewer single-family residences. This definition is found in other jurisdictions in the area and also includes pieces from Ecology's definition in the WAC.
Great, thanks, Molly. Council, so what Molly has just walked you through here in the last couple of slides is the crux of the Planning Commission recommendation. We did receive, since the packet went out last week, a handful of questions and comments from council members. We are going to address those in the last couple of slides, but we wanted to break here with Chair Murphy joining us to see if council would like to ask any questions of staff or Chair Murphy about the Planning Commission process or any part of the rest of the process to date, and we'll be happy to try and answer those before we move on to wrap it up.
Very good. Looks like a first question from Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Yeah, thanks. Chair Murphy, it's good to see you here. Thanks to you and the commission for your work that you do on this, and also thanks to the staff. I wanted to ask a question. So the other 2 facilities that would, I don't know, I'm probably not going to use the right terminology here, but that would be covered by this. Did we receive feedback or any sort of comments from them about this proposal?
Yes, they did. Generally, they were supportive of the efforts by the Beach Club and have been supportive, I believe, of the final product.
Great, thanks.
Hey, Councilmember Reynolds.
Just want to follow up on something I asked today that I'm not sure I fully understood the answer for. I believe, if not mistaken, there are a number of areas on the island where there are shared dock facilities that would serve more than 4 families that are not open to the public. Like, if I'm not mistaken, down near Groveland, there's a neighborhood that has like 8 or 10 boat slips down there, for example. Where do they fit in this? Because they don't seem like they're covered by this because they're not open to the public, but they're more than 4. Does that mean anything in any way?
No, in fact, there was considerable discussion about that issue, those possibilities in the Planning Commission. The sentiment, clear sentiment of the commission was we did not want to expand this beyond the 3 existing facilities. And in fact, there's a provision in the code, maybe Molly can pull that up for us, that specifically says that.
Good.
Okay. Any other questions for Planning Chair Murphy? No. All right. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So we'll get the remaining slides up here on the screen. There's just a few. So as I said before we broke there for Q&A, we did receive some questions and comments from council members after the packet went out late last week. And embedded in that and through staff discussing council questions and comments, there were some council-derived minor clarifications to amend essentially the commission recommendation in the draft ordinance that's in your packet tonight. And what Molly's going to do now is she's going to walk you through the 4 items that, again, came about through and from council members. Molly, go ahead. Thank you.
All right. So the first recommended change has to do with the eligibility requirement of providing significant public access through serving at least 50 people. This would change the requirement from a marina being owned or operated by an organization or corporation serving at least 50 people to the marina itself serving 50 people. The idea behind this would be to ensure that the marina itself is providing significant public access for people on the island versus the organization or corporation that owns the facility. And you can see the strikeout up there in red. The second recommended amendment just provides more consistency in the language used. There are several standards that specify when things are prohibited in the marina. So this amendment would add this same level of clarification to the regulation on prohibiting floating homes and liveaboard vessels. The last recommended amendment also provides more consistency in the language used regarding length limitations to overwater structures associated with the marinas. This amendment removes the words to reduce the maximum length and replaces it to read, the code official may condition approval of the length to reduce the effects of overwater structures on navigability of the waterway, which eliminates the confusion around the word maximum since we do not establish a maximum length of overwater structures in the proposed standards. We instead have the applicant demonstrate through the demand analysis the minimum length necessary to accomplish their needs. So the fourth recommendation is regarding the boat sales portion in this definition. And as I said earlier, this definition was taken from other jurisdictions in the area, and boat sales might not be as relevant to the city of Mercer Island, at least at this point. So it was likely included throughout the review process to provide a more broad list of uses for a marina. But since marinas are only limited to those locations where marinas exist today, staff recommends removing boat sales as an incidental service to the marinas.
Mayor, why don't we, there's a couple of hands, why don't we take those questions now and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, that sounds good. Councilmember Reynolds.
Yes, Molly, could you go back to the prior slide, please? Could you just clarify on the middle of the 3 indented bullet points there? If I were lucky enough to own a 40-foot boat that's got a head and a kitchen and a bed in it, that could be a liveaboard, but I'm not living on it. It's just my recreational boat that I take offshore periodically. Is that allowed or not allowed in a marina?
I guess we would need to look more into whether it would be defined as a floating home and liveaboard vessel and whether that's the intended use of the vessel. I don't have an answer, specifically in a specific scenario, whether that would be allowed or not.
Yeah, so the floating homes to me kind of sounds like a houseboat, and it's pretty clear somewhat clear what it means by that. But a lot of big boats could be lived aboard, I guess my hope would be that they would be allowed there, just as long as people weren't actually living in them. But I don't know what the intent is.
Councilmember Reynolds, I believe that's the intent. I would invite Allison, or Molly's already opined on that, but Allison, do you recall anything?
Yeah, I agree that the intent here is to prohibit people from living at the marina, not to prohibit a certain type of vessel necessarily. And so I think a boat that had, for example, a head and a sleeping area, I think that would probably still be acceptable. And that would just be, the details of that would be reviewed as part of an application.
Well, I don't want to dictate wording on the fly. We all know how dangerous that is, but I might suggest that wording be the subject for clarification before the second reading.
Okay, we'll log that and circle back to it.
Okay, Councilmember Jacobson. You're on mute, Jake. Councilmember Jacobson, can you hear me? You're on mute, Jake. He's going to regret this speech not being able to be heard. Maybe we could stop the screen share and that might grab his attention. Can't hear you, Jake.
No,
There we go. Gonna have to start over.
I couldn't get to my face here to unmute. At any rate, my question is if Chairman Murphy's still with us, if he has a take on any of these on these amendments or these corrections that Molly has outlined. And I guess secondly, I would say I agree with Councilmember Reynolds that the B portion that about floating homes and liveaboard vessels does need a little bit of cleanup because there's I think some potential misunderstandings about what that's prohibiting and permitting. So anyway.
Yeah. Allison, can we get the slide deck back up now that we've recovered Councilmember Jacobson on audio? Yeah, maybe just spend a little bit more time on these. So these staff recommendations, again, were derived from Councilmember comments and questions. The first, maybe just take a moment here to go through these one by one. The first one, L2B, the first sub bullet there, that suggestion came from Councilmember Reynolds, and it was it came from a question about whether a corporation could potentially buy a facility and then essentially create a closed loop for that particular facility. We want to make sure that, as Molly had mentioned, it is serving people in the public and the minimum 50 people that are indicated there. So that was that one. The second one that's on the screen here, the one that was just being discussed with Council members Reynolds and Jacobson. This actually was an initial suggestion, again, from Councilmember Reynolds. The in marinas was simply just a language consistency issue. I believe it was the preceding subsection that's in Section 3 of the ordinance had in marinas, and there was a question about whether this should also just have in marinas for consistent language. So that's why that made it in. Now there's a new issue here that's come up with this particular subsection here tonight about the applicability of, someone has a boat that does have certain types of facilities within it where someone could potentially stay on the boat for a period of time. Is that getting into these things here? We're going to go back and do a little work here in between readings to clarify, the intent and the meaning of floating homes and liveaboard vessels. I believe the intent here was not to create sub-communities down at these marina type places where we've got whole new neighborhoods popping up. We wanted to keep these for boats where people have a real house and they live there, but they use their boat on weekends or, for vacations and so forth. So, but we'll dig into those terms a little bit more and certainly provide an update to City Council here in between readings on that. The third one, I believe came from the mayor, if I'm not mistaken. And it was just a word. It was the way this 6B Roman numeral 2 was reading in concert with 6B Roman numeral 1, where in Roman numeral 1, the word minimum was being used for the minimum necessary length of the actual structure. And then they just weren't reading quite right together when we used minimum in one sense and then maximum in another. So we were able to determine that removing the word maximum was just a better use and a better read of the two the two Roman numerals combined when you look at it in code. So that was that. And then Molly or Allison, excuse me, if you just want to go to the fourth one real quick, the definition, removing boat sales. That was a question from Councilmember Reynolds. And what that was about, do we really want to have commercial boat sales in a designated marina in Mercer Island? And I think Molly alluded to this, not really a use that's applicable to Mercer Island and where these facilities are located. I want to be clear though, removal of boat sales doesn't preclude a private boat sale. Someone has a boat that's at one of these facilities and they have it for sale on the private market for a private sale. Someone can still do that, just like someone can own a house and have a vehicle parked at their house and put their vehicle on Auto Trader or Facebook or whatever to sell it privately as well. So that's not precluded just by removing boat sales from the definition. Mayor, with that, I just wanted to run through those quickly, and it looks like I've generated a couple more questions. So
I appreciate that. Councilmember Jacobson.
Yes, my concern is, and if you flip back to the prior slide, Mr. Thomas, that would be great, is in the 1913 050. And one of the problems that comes up in these, these kinds of things, I don't know if the liveaboard vessels are defined any place. Oftentimes they're not, or something. The thing that the concern I have is at one point I owned a 23 or 25-foot boat, and it could sleep two, it had a kitchenette, it had a toilet, and it was actually at the beach club. And we went out with the kids and et cetera, et cetera. But I think that needs to be defined somewhere. And there may be a definition section in the statute. I will lay at it this afternoon and didn't see it. But I think that needs a little TLC.
Yeah, after the discussion here this evening, having it brought up, I will tell you that we share the same concern. So we will do some reconciliation with the Shoreline Management Act and state provisions and see if we can flesh that out here in short order.
Okay, Councilmember Reynolds.
Yes, if we go to the next slide after this one again for a second. I'm glad you took out the boat sales, thank you. But then can you just clarify for me if the beach club or the shore club or somebody like that were decide that they want to have a program to rent out kayaks to their members? Would they be able to do that since rental activities are allowed?
Yeah, I see rental activities there. Molly or Allison, was that any background on that for Councilmember Reynolds?
I don't think we discussed that particular eventuality with the Planning Commission, but I do think this definition would allow something like kayak rentals.
I think that's good, but I also think it's something we should make a conscious decision on. So I want other people to have some input on that.
Okay, duly noted. It's in the text. Councilmember Weicker.
So I just have a question about these private clubs. Don't they also have their own rules that would go on top of these new language and codes? Allison, like don't the shore club, beach club, country club have their own rules about what's rented, what's not?
I presume they do, and they must have some kind of rental contract for the people that are renting slips.
I know they don't allow overnight camping, for example, or sleeping. So like us ruminating too extensively on this, like I think they have their own rules, especially since they're private. But so I would say whether they do rental or not, I think giving them the option of that with their private club with all their membership is okay.
Very good. Councilmember Reynolds, old hand, new hand?
Old hand, sorry.
Okay, looks like you've exhausted the questions.
All right, like a puppy running uphill. Let's Allison, let's move to the next slide. This is our final slide, Mayor. So the recommendation here with first reading is to direct us, staff, to make those 4 council-derived changes as presented here this evening, and then looking for the council to set a second reading date for the ordinance and potential adoption. Our next meeting of regular business is October 3rd. So that would be the first opportunity for the council to bring this back onto your agenda. And one final thing we wanted to cover, the effective date of the ordinance. Molly mentioned in her presentation with this ecology being part of the review process here. Once council does complete a second reading and presumed adoption of the ordinance won't become effective on our normal schedule, like when the clerk will then publish in 5 days thereafter. What will happen is that the ordinance will actually go to ecology for final review and approval. And then once we get word that ecology has issued its final approval, the ordinance is written so we won't need to come back to you again. It will then just take effective after that ecology approval is issued. So wanted to note that for the record. That's something a little bit unique about having a state agency involved with our process here. So with that, we've got one piece of homework to do, which is to flesh out the definitions of those, and we'll report back to council on that. Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. Not seeing any other questions, I'm going to ask for a motion. So council, is there a motion to move to set ordinance number 23C-15, including staff recommended amendments as discussed for second reading and adoption at the October 3, 2023 City Council meeting?
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Jacobson, seconded by Councilmember Reynolds. Any discussion? Not seeing any discussion. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick point of clarification. The motion that Director Thomas displayed on the screen was different than the motion that I included in your script. Director Thomas, did you want the part of direct staff to make the 4 amendments included in the motion? So the motion would be direct staff to make the 4 amendments as presented and move to set ordinance number 23C-15 for second reading and adoption on October 3rd, 2023.
Yes, the motion I think that was originally crafted was prior to receiving the council input. So the updated one would be great. Thank you. So we'll make those changes for the council.
I amend my adoption motion just to include the items mentioned by the clerk.
Okay, is that good with you, Councilmember Reynolds?
Yeah, I thought they already were in there, but maybe I wasn't listening closely enough.
No, my motion did cover it, maybe even more eloquently than this motion, but we can do that if that is the will of CPD Director Thomas.
Maybe I wasn't listening properly either. So if you feel the original motion covered what we need to, let's just go with that. I apologize. So.
Okay, I will read the original motion, which was council is there move to set ordinance number 23C-15, including staff recommended amendments as discussed for second reading and adoption at the October 3, 2023 City Council meeting.
My apologies, I missed that middle section of your amendment.
No problem. I inserted that.
But that does seem to cover it.
Okay, so we're back to the original motion, moved by Jacobson, seconded by Reynolds. Not seeing any further discussion. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Aye.
Councilmember Weinberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Mayor Neese.
Aye.
Councilmember Androl.
Aye.
And Councilmember Weicker.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Allison and Molly and Jeff. We now move to other business in the planning schedule, for which we'll welcome City Manager Jesse Bond.
Good evening again, City Council. As I mentioned earlier this evening, your next hybrid meeting is on October 3rd. I don't have anything specific to go over on the planning schedule, but I'll just remind you again that we are working to get you back into an in-person meeting opportunity, and we are aiming to have the technology in place to host our council meetings here at the community center where I am sitting this evening by the first meeting in November. So we'll continue to keep you posted on that work.
Excellent. Thank you. Councilmember reports. Councilmember Androl.
I would just say that I attended our kind of quarterly coffee with a cop meetings at L'Experience Paris on Saturday. Lots of members of the force, lots of interesting conversation. Ed reported back to me that he got to meet a number of members of the community he had not previously encountered. So I would encourage council members and citizens alike to keep an eye out for those announcements. Like I said, I think they happen quarterly, Saturday mornings, and it's a great opportunity to interact with our police force on a non-ticketable item.
Yeah, for sure. Councilmember Jacobson. You're on mute, Jake.
I'm the liaison to the utility board, which met a week ago tonight, and it dealt with several items. First, the water supply reliability action plan was introduced, and we don't have, it did not have, we've dreamed up a second source of water for Mercer Island, but it outlined where we are and the group that's going ahead and looking at that problem. And not only another source of water, but what will we do with tanks and a whole lot of things, because it's a pretty broad subject, and it may be a costly one for us, may or may not be. We're not there to be able to cost it yet. We also took a look at and looked at rates for our water and sewer, and we'll be seeing that very shortly to hear before too long about to approve increases in both of them, as well as the garbage rate. Now, the garbage people have in a contract the ability to reopen it periodically, and the garbage rates are undoubtedly going to go up because King County drives that by what they charge at the tipping fee, and then that backs into the rates, and the tipping fee is going up, so our garbage rates are going up. How much, we're not exactly sure yet, but put your seatbelt on.
Very good. I have nothing to report. Councilmember Reynolds.
Two quick things. One, to point out that the K4C is having an elected officials work session that all of us are invited to, which will be in person for the first time in a long time, I believe, on October 12th, in a location in downtown Seattle, location to TBD. Hope to attend. Hope others of us will go there as well. And second, I just want to extend a congratulations. Just noticed that 12 Mercer Island High School kids were named as National Merit semifinalists. Kind of a big deal. Want to give a big shout out. Congratulations to them. It's a lot to be proud of.
Very good. Deputy Mayor Rosenbaum.
Nothing to report.
Okay. Councilmember Weicker. Okay.
Nothing to report.
Got it. Councilmember Weiber.
Nothing to report.
All right. The next hybrid meeting of the City Council is scheduled for Tuesday, October 3, 2023 at 5 p.m. The time is now 7:38 p.m. The City Council will go into executive session for approximately 60 minutes to discuss with legal counsel litigation or potential litigation to which the city is or is likely to become a party pursuant to RCW 42.30.110, paren 1, close paren little I, close paren. As a reminder, City Council, please stay seated until the city has terminated